Psalm 5. O Lord, hear me as I pray. Pay attention to my groaning. Listen to my cry for help, my King and my God. For I pray to no one but you. Listen to my voice in the morning, O Lord. Each morning I bring my request to you, and I wait expectantly. I got it, Afrikaans. Somebody did say to me, why did you stop reading the Afrikaans? So I'm going to read the first. Where are we now? With chapter 5. Psalm 5 vir die musiekleier met fluite en Psalm van Dawid. O Here, luister na my woorde. Let op na my versigtiging. Gee ag op my stem van my hulpgeroep, my koning en my God, want tot U bid ek. In die môre, Here, sal ek U stem hoor, en môre sal ek in die môre sal ek dit aan U voorlê en afwag. Maybe one day you'll understand Afrikaans. Yeah? Maybe, just maybe. Right, so we go through this Psalm. We've been, is it the second week on Psalm 5 in the Bible study? Yeah. It's really good. It gives us such a thought into the mind of David when he writes and things. So Psalm 5, listen to my words, O Lord, and hear my sigh, or hear my groaning, or other translations say, consider my meditation. Listen to my cry for help, or other translations say, give attention to my cry, to the sound of my cry, my God and my King, for to you I pray, and no one else but you. And that's so significant to you. You know, we can just make an assumption. David says, to you alone I pray, but back then there were so many gods. You know, there was a God for the sun, there was a God for everything, but David says, to you alone, and to no one else I pray, to you alone. David says, hear my words when I pray. Hear my words when I pray. When I think about that first line, hear my words when I pray, I think if David could have written, if he could have written, listen to my words if I pray. You know, it will take a bit of this thing, but if means sort of is conditional. But he says, hear my voice when I pray. And we can see in verse 3, it says, listen to my voice when? In the morning, Lord. Each morning I bring my request to you, and I wait expectantly. Wait, hear my voice when I pray. David here is pleading to get God's attention. God, I need you. God, I need to hear from you. This is what David is saying. But David understood this. David understood when he calls upon the attention of God. When you call upon the attention of God, it creates a deeper space for a sense of awareness for God. And when you have that awareness, there's a connection. You cannot just call on the attention of God. It's not just something that you just do. David does it so often. He calls God for his attention. But he knows when he does that, there's inside of him, there's an awareness of the presence of God. There's an awareness of the holiness of God. And he knew that when there's that awareness and that connection, you cannot but surrender to God. When you have inside of you that surrender, when you have inside of you that awareness of who God is, and I did say it so many times that the church has sort of lost this reverence for God. The postmodern church has lost our reverence for God. But when you come into the presence of God with that sense of awareness of who He is and of His holiness and that sense of connection, you cannot but surrender to God. We sing that song, I surrender all, but do we really mean it? Do we really? I'm not talking about surrender part, but the all part. Do we surrender all? You cannot surrender all if you don't have that sense of awareness of the presence of God, the awareness of the holiness of God. That's when you can surrender. But David understood this. David says, pay attention to my groanings. Groanings means that it's an expression of pain without using words. You don't use words. And when I think about groaning, I always think about Hannah. When Hannah was praying, the Bible says that God closed her womb. When you read that, it's really cruel. God closed the womb. But she did not accept that. She prayed, and she continued to pray, and she prayed, and she prayed until she ran out of words. She didn't have words anymore. And when she was praying in the temple, Eli was watching her, and she was just groaning before God. And Eli thought she was drunk. And Eli went to confront her, and she was in tears. No words could come out. But when was the last time that you and I groaned before God? And when you have a loved one, and when you've been praying for a loved one for a long time, and you realize nothing is happening, you've been praying for so long and nothing is happening, and when you get to that stage where you groan before God, when was the last time that you and I groaned for our church? And when was the last time that we groaned for the lost out there? When was the last time that we groaned, for those, for our schools and for our community and for our valley? When was the last time that you laid before God and you groaned? I remember, I told you the story, I remember I was praying for my brother for years and years, and it was quite weird. And sometimes I would be lying in the passage, the church I grew up in the middle, people was walking over me, and sometimes I would lay on the stage where people are singing, and the leads would be all over, and people would be confused, what am I doing? But I got to that stage where I was just groaning before God, before He said, I was just crying out to God to save Him. I was crying out. I didn't have words anymore because I was praying so long, but I continued, and I didn't see the result, but I continued. And one Sunday morning, I was busy preparing. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, or 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I was just sitting and reading, and I had a text to say, is there anything I can pray for you? I thought, this is not real. This is not real. And he said, I've made a commitment. I've been praying for 10 years for God to save him. I ran out of words. I was groaning and I was crying before his soul, and God heard my prayer. But we need to come to that point where we groan for those who are lost. We really need to. If we're not groaning, it means that we are not burdened for this, for the lost out there. We are not burdened. David says, my pain is much deeper than my words. Sometimes we can say words, but the pain is so deep. David says the pain is so deep. It resonates so deep. I cannot put it into words, but David wants God to understand his pain. David wants God to recognize his pain. David wants God just to give him a heads up and say, I know about your pain. And as much as you pray, David, as much as you do this, but I know about the pain. I know about what's deep inside of you. Isn't that true for you and I? You don't want to talk about what is deep inside there. Because, like I say so many times, what are people going to say? But when you get to God, you can be open and you can be transparent to God. God, I have this pain inside of me. I haven't dealt with this thing that has been dragging me down, but it is inside of me, Lord. Heal me from it. Lord, I don't have the words to express. I prayed so many times about the same thing, but Lord, the pain is still there. What are you going to do? Have you been there? David says, listen to my cry, listen to my cry. If you notice, there's a sort of a transition from hearing to listening. It says, hear me as I pray. Listen to my cry for help. Listen to my voice in the morning. There's a difference between hearing and listening. You see, when God hears your prayer, He's aware of our words that we speak. He's aware of it. But when God listens to our prayer, it's something different. Listening goes much deeper than just hearing. It is more profound. It is much broader than just hearing. It requires God's full attention and a level of engagement. Therefore, David writes in Psalm 40, verse 1, he says, incline your ear to me. What does that mean? It almost means that God's going to leave everything that He's busy with to bend down and listen to my prayer. That's what David says to God. Incline your ear. Incline means to get down and listen to what I have to say. Incline your ear. to me, O Lord. But this 2 verses gives me indication of David's confidence. And I always like this, David's confidence in God. David's heart for God. Gives me a glimpse of the type of relationship that David had with God. We all know that David was a man after God's heart. But I think God was preparing his heart through everything that he went through. I can well imagine when David was lying in the night when he was looking after the sheep. He would lie, I can imagine that he would lie with his head on a stone and he would look up to the heavens and he would see the beauty of God and he would see the stars and he would question God and he'd say, how is it that there's so many stars? And God, how is it that you could name all these stars? God, if one star is 1 mile closer than the other, it could be catastrophic. But God, how is it that it is so many stars, the cosmic tapestry? And he would just be mesmerized of the beauty of nature. And I think God was preparing his heart. It was when he was fighting the bear. It was in that process where God was preparing his heart. It was when he was fighting Goliath, when nobody else wanted to. That's when God was preparing his heart. It was when he was running away from his own son and had altercations with King Saul. That's when God was preparing his heart. God was preparing his heart. That's why he was a man after God's heart. He did not, sometimes we don't want to be involved in the process, but we want the trophy. We want the trophy of saying, hey, we've done it, and we, well done, tap on the back, but we don't want the process. I'm sure if you ask the World Cup winning captain of any team, particularly rugby, if you ask him, what's more important, lifting the World Cup or the process getting to the World Cup? I'm sure they would tell you, had it not been for the process, we would have not won the World Cup. The process is so overlooked, but it's so important. David had a unique relationship with God. David didn't only knew God, he knew him personally. He didn't only knew him personally, he knew him intimately. Because David could pour out his heart, something I struggle with. Perhaps us as men, to pour out our heart. David is showing us the importance of pouring out your heart. David had a repentant heart. David was quite open and honest about his emotions, something that we struggle with. To be open with our emotions, to be open with our emotions. And the more I look into the life of David, the more I realize every time David gets closer to God, every time he would get closer to God, he would become more aware of the presence and of the holiness of God. And the more he becomes aware of God's holiness, the more he becomes aware of his own sinful ways. If the presence of God doesn't highlight the things that we do wrong in your life, then I don't know where you are. When you come into the presence of God, there's God, when the Spirit is moving, and when you become aware of your sinful nature, that's what it was like in the revival. Did you know? People would have a pint, and the presence of God was so tangible. People would have a pint in the middle of the night and would put the presence of God was so tangible. They're not Christian. They put the pint down and they run to the closest church, knocking up the vicar and say, "Pray for me." That's what I mean. When the presence of God becomes so tangible, you cannot. But when you have that sinful nature, you're going to leave it because the presence of God is so overwhelming. And here's what I like about David. Despite his faults and his flaws and his mistakes, he always ran back to God. We spoke in the Bible study, and Sue often says she finds it hard to understand how David could be so close to God, given everything he'd done wrong. But every time he would sin, the first thing he would do is to run back to God. And that's where we get it wrong. When we begin to sin, we begin to turn our back on God. You feel that God cannot forgive you. Lord, I've done it again. Lord, I'm so shameful, and because I'm shameful, I might as well just walk away. And then blame the pastor and say, oh, the pastor hasn't visited me. The pastor hasn't come to see me. But sometimes it's a choice. Whenever you get it wrong, admit it. Get back to God. Get back to God. Stop running away from God. And I've always said this, my father always used to say, when I feel low and when I feel down and when I feel sick, I run to church. Even though I cannot run, even if they have to carry me, I want to be in church because that's when I can get my healing. That's where I will get my deliverance. That's where I will get my freedom. Stop running away from God. Get back to God. That's such a powerful lesson from David. And because of David's closeness to God, he was compelled to go deeper. I don't know if I should go there. Go deeper. Because the secret is the better that God has in store for you and I. The revelation, the power, the purpose is all locked up in the deeper. It is not on the surface. It is not, if you want to know God on an intimate level, you won't find it on the surface. Stop scratching the surface. I'm not even talking about comfort zone or anything like that. If you want to see God, if you want to experience it, you've got to go deeper. You've got to go deeper. Go deeper, go deeper. Stop this scratching the surface and stop this, this and that and do your best to go deeper. Make a conscious decision that you're going to go deeper. And when you make that decision, be disciplined in it. Disciplined. Discipline is, no matter how I feel today, I'm going to get up anyway and I'm going to read my Bible. No matter if I feel not well or not, I'm going to get up anyway and I'm going to spend time with God. You will not regret it. The reason why so many people don't want to go deeper, because we don't like the discipline part. But more than that, we don't, it's scary to go from where you are to go deeper. It's scary. Like Chris was saying years ago, when you dive into the ocean, you see the beauty is underneath, it's the perils, the beauty is underneath. But you got to go deeper in order to see it. It's not there. You got to go deeper. But for me, I'm afraid to swim. I don't want to go deeper. I got to find a different way. For me, I'm scary. It's a scary thought of going in there and find out what God is really like. It's a fearful thought of the fear of the unknown. Oh, what am I going to get there? Go deeper. Go deeper. Andrew Murray said, our greatest need is to know, our greatest need, not want, but our greatest need is to know God more deeply. Spurgeon said the following, he said, nothing can satisfy my soul more than the deep acquaintance with Him. The depth of your relationship with God is not measured by how much you know about God, but how closely you walk with Him. Listen to my words, my God and my King. For unto you and unto you alone I pray. I like that part. I want to focus on that. For unto you and you alone I pray. For unto you. That could be a sentence, but then he continued. And you alone I pray. David wants to emphasize the importance. You and you alone deserves our worship. God, you and you alone deserves our worship. I'm not talking about coming Sunday and sing. There's a line in the song that says, your dying breath has brought me life. If you listen to that repetitiously, your dying breath has brought me life. In other words, you had to die so that I can live. Isn't that enough to worship God? Isn't that enough to give your all to Him? You and you alone can calm the storm. You and you alone can calm the storm. When Jesus was on the waters, His disciples was frightened. Jesus spoke to the wind or the waves or the storm. That verse says, instantaneously the storm stopped. The disciples were amused. They said, who is this man that even the waves obey him? It is him and him alone that can calm the storms in your life. Nobody else. Him and him alone. If you haven't tried it, I would like to advise you to try it. It is him and he alone that can calm the storm. It is him and him alone that can fill the void in your life. And so many of us, even sitting here, there's this void in you. And you have tried everything, all the alternatives ways. And you have tried everything. When you come to chapter 3, you realize whatever I tried has brought me nowhere. But I want to say to you, it is him and him alone that can fill the void in your life. I am the bread of life. I am the bread of life. And when you eat of me, you will never hunger again. It is him and him alone that is our strength in our weakness. Here's the problem with me. Sometimes I don't want to admit my weakness. They can go upstairs, the kids. Well, yeah, the kids can go upstairs. Where was I now? Welcome. Oh, welcome. Yeah, it is you and you alone that can take my strength and give, that can take my weakness and give me strength in return. I battled with this for such a long time, to be honest with you. And I went to a camp and this guy said to me, I've never met him, he says to me, how can you recognize the strength of God if you don't recognize your own weakness? How can you recognize that you need strength if you don't come to the point where you yourself realize that you are weak inside? You know, it's okay to feel weak for the very reason that in our weakness, His strength can take our weakness and make us strong. It is you and you alone that can bring chaos to our world. It is you and you alone that can restore that which has been lost. We were praying like yesterday. I was just so overwhelmed by it all to see so many people together for the one purpose. And I did say to them as well, stop calling this these valleys. Stop praying about these valleys. You know what? You know, when you say these valleys, you put yourself outside of it. And you speak about the valley, these valleys. But when you say our valleys, you put yourself in it. And you're part of it all. You're part of it all. It is Him and Him alone that can restore that has been lost. And it is time that we as a church stand up and declare it that the enemy is no longer going to come and conveniently take whatever he wants, because it is Him and Him alone. You know, with the shepherd, He's our shepherd, and I battle with the idea that He would leave the 99. What about them? What about their safety? What about their well-being? He would leave them and come after me. And come after me and look for me and protect me and make sure that I'm taken care of. He is our shepherd and He has our best interest in Him and Him alone. Have you tried anything else and it doesn't work? I can give you advice today. It is Jesus and Jesus alone that can restore what the enemy has taken from you. And we can claim it. And we can claim it. We can start claiming it today. We're going to take back our community. We're going to take back our community. We've been praying for favor for such a long time. And it seems that God is busy opening doors for us. Last week, we've been saying, oh, we want to get into Chuoki Comp. There might be an opening for us soon. We've been praying for favor, and there might be an opportunity for us to get into the college as well, to share the good news. Favor. We're going to continuously remind God about His promises. It is Him and Him alone that can deliver and restore us. David writes in Psalm 18, he says, you are my deliverer. You are my strength. You are my rock. You are my fortress. And you're the horn of my salvation. It is Him and Him alone that can give you purpose. I can give you purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, a passion for life. It is Him and Him alone, because He created us with a purpose and for a purpose. Colossians 1 verse 16 says, everything, absolutely everything, above and below, visible and invisible, everything that started in Him and find their purpose in Him. It is only Him that can give you purpose. It is only Him that can give you purpose. Here's the thing about purpose. No matter how young or old you are, it's not restricted to how young you are. It's not restricted to how old you are. You've got so much to give. That wealth of experience is in you. You better give it. Miles Monroe said, I challenge you to die empty. I challenge you to die empty. He said, so many people are caught up in the idea of longevity. I want to live long. But they forget about living a life where they can deposit into the lives of those around them. Jesus didn't live long. He didn't live long. But yet we talk about Him so many years ago. We are so in our time that we live in. We want to live longer, but we forget about living purposefully and donating our wealth of experience into the next generation. I close with this. Looking into the Psalms has really challenged me, and I mean, it really, really challenged me. I don't just say it because it's part of it. Really challenged me because I've been asking the question, why did God use people like David so profoundly? And yet David, we can name all David's flaws and his faults and his mistakes and everything he done, but why was it that God used David so profoundly? I've been asking God this question, honestly I have. Why is God not raising, why are you not raising people like David up in our time? Why don't we see Moses and Joseph and all these, people with that type of character? Why don't we see them anymore? I asked the same question for about 2 weeks, and I felt a whisper in my ear and said, because we don't follow their patterns. I'll explain what I mean. There's a guy by the name of Bob Proctor. Have you heard of him? Bob Proctor, he's dead now. I used to listen to his stuff. He was quite, motivational stuff, and he would say he was at his lowest one time, and he struggled financially, and he stumbled upon a tape of Earl Nightingale. Have you heard about him, Earl Nightingale? No, not me. He stumbled across the tapes of Earl Nightingale, and he began to listen to it. He said he listened to it every day, 24/7. And then he sold his company. He was working in London. He sold his business to come and work for Earl Nightingale voluntarily, just to be close to this guy. He saw what Earl Nightingale was doing. He had a book holder on his desk, and he was reading a book. He said, "What are you reading?" He bought the same thing, and he read. He said, for the next 10 years, I read the same book because Earl Nightingale was doing it. And he would anytime he would get it, he would go into him, and he said, what are you thinking? When life comes at you, when life throws, what are you thinking? I want to know what you're thinking. And then he goes again, what are you doing in the morning when you get up? And everything that this guy told him, he done it. He just done everything to the T. What are you eating? I want to eat that. Everything. He followed his pattern. He followed his pattern. And here's the pattern of Abraham and all the others. Abraham was known as the man of faith. But you know what made him stood out? His obedience and his faith. Even if he didn't see the result. His obedience and his faith. Moses had a challenge with speech and he tried to talk himself out of it. But God saw in him the greatness to lead a nation. But you know what made him stood out? Was his humility. I don't want to say anything on that. I leave it. His humility and his dependence on God. Humility has left the church, by the way. Joseph, when he was sold by his brothers, he was in the prison and he was dreaming. Joseph was a dreamer. He was dreaming and he was a leader. But you know what made him stood out? Was his integrity in adversity. His integrity in adversity. Put somebody in a situation and you see what comes out of them. David, you know what? David was a man after God's heart. You know what set him apart from the rest? His repentant heart and his passion for God. David had a passion like nobody else for God, despite his flaws. You know what? Peter denied Jesus in public. But Jesus said, "On you I will build my church." You know what made him stand up? His courage. We've done through Acts, and I can see this when Peter, when every time he would be challenged, he would be standing up, and he stand up because the Holy Spirit is with him. He would be standing up, and the 12 was with him. He would be stand up, but he was courageous. Courageous. What about Paul? Do you know what Paul was doing? He was a persecutor, a murderer, in simple words. But you know what made him stand? His unshakable passion for God and his obedience for God. If I list you all those qualities quickly, I want you to see where you fit it in your life. Obedience and faith. Obedience is better than sacrifice. I struggle with the faith part. I do. Like I said the other time, we want to try this and we want to try that, instead of just putting our faith in God. Where do you see yourself in your humility before God? Where do you rate your humility before God? Where do you see your dependence? If you were to rate yourself, your dependence on, I'm okay. I don't need to depend on God, because when we find out we can do something and we do it well and we copy it and we do it, then we realize that we don't need God anymore, and we do our own thing and we move away from the principles of God. Where do you see yourself in your dependence? And where do you see yourself in your integrity in adversity? When life really hits you, when somebody tells you something, and how do you respond? How do you react? Where do you see yourself like David with his repentant heart? Where do you see yourself with the courage of your faith? I saw you yesterday, Kevin he says he's going to Ponty to buy stuff for a daughter, and then you end up preaching. You end up preaching. Where do you see yourself with the courage, your courage? And my goal, I want to be honest with you, my goal or my plan or whatever, when I came into this church, I said, my first thing is to make sure that those that I hear are confident in sharing their faith. We are confident in sharing it. Where do you see yourself in that? Do you have an unshakable passion for God? Or is it just on and off? Whenever the situation arises, whenever it's comfortable. Where do you list yourself in those? Well, David is so transparent in his emotions. I can tell you that I need to work on so many of them. In fact, on everything I need to work on. I haven't got it all together. I get it wrong most of the times. But I try again tomorrow.